Have you ever wondered why you hesitate to speak, even when you know you're right? Or why you keep making the same decisions, even after promising yourself you wouldn't? The truth is, your mind is not broken. It is simply following invisible psychological patterns. These patterns are called psychological effects. They influence how you think, how you feel, and how you act, often without your permission. Today, I will show you 10 of the most common psychological effects that quietly control human behavior. And more importantly, I will show you how to free yourself from them. Once you recognize these effects, they lose their power. So, grab your attention, because your mind is about to play a little trick on you. Let's start with something familiar. A man walks into a room a few minutes late. A few people look up. Nothing dramatic, just a glance. But for him, that's enough. He thinks, great, they noticed. Pause here. This moment triggers one of the most common psychological distortions humans experience. It's called the spotlight effect. The spotlight effect is the tendency to believe that other people notice and remember you far more than they actually do. Your mind puts a spotlight on you even when the room has already moved on. Now watch the contrast. The conversation continues. Someone laughs, someone checks their phone, but he doesn't relax. He straightens his clothes, walks more carefully, and becomes hyper-aware of every movement, thinking not to mess this up. Here's the problem. The spotlight doesn't exist in reality. It exists in his perception. Why does the brain create this illusion? Because for most of human history, attention from the group meant danger. Being noticed could lead to rejection, punishment, or loss of safety. That wiring still exists. So when people look at you, your nervous system reacts before logic does. Heart rate increases, thoughts narrow, mistakes feel larger than they are. But here's what he cannot see. Everyone else is running their own spotlight. One person is replaying something embarrassing they said earlier, another is worried about how they look, someone else is thinking about what comes next. No one is tracking him. This is where the damage happens. Believing you're being watched turns normal situations into pressure. It pushes you into self-monitoring mode. Instead of engaging, you perform. Instead of expressing, you edit. He hesitates, thinking maybe he shouldn't speak. Over time, this has a cost. The spotlight effect reduces spontaneity. It limits creativity. It trains you to avoid visibility instead of using it. Now let's correct the distortion. Not with confidence, with accuracy. Here's the first correction. You experience your life continuously. Others experience you in fragments. You notice every mistake you make. Others notice only what emotionally affects them. And this leads to the second correction. People don't remember events. They remember how they felt during those events. Your small mistake didn't trigger emotion, so it didn't attach to memory. Attention does not equal importance. Emotion does. Now here's the practical method to weaken the spotlight effect. Step 1. Reverse the focus. Ask yourself, how much do I remember other people's small mistakes today? Almost none. That's not kindness. That's cognitive limitation. Step 2. Replace performance with participation. When you feel watched, stop checking how you look. Shift attention to what you are doing. Listen actively. Respond naturally. This breaks the self-monitoring loop. Step 3. Use exposure, not avoidance. Each time you act, despite the spotlight, your brain updates its prediction. Nothing bad happens. The alarm weakens. The goal is not to eliminate the spotlight effect. The goal is to see it clearly and stop obeying it. Look back at the room. Nothing changed. No one reacted. No one remembered. The only thing that changed was perception. And once perception is corrected, behavior follows. That's how the spotlight effect loses its power. Now that we've seen why it feels like everyone's watching, let's move on to effect 2, the streetlight effect. Here, the light itself can trick us into looking in the wrong place. Let me show you a classic scene. It's late at night. A man is standing under a streetlight, scanning the ground carefully. A police officer walks by and asks what he's looking for. He replies that he lost his keys. The officer looks around and asks if he dropped them there. The man pauses, then says, "No, he dropped them over there." The officer asks, "Then why are you looking here?" He answers simply, "Because this is where the light is." Pause here. This is not a joke. This is how the human mind works. It's called the streetlight effect. The streetlight effect is the tendency to search for answers only where it's easiest to look, not where the answer is most likely to be found. The brain prefers clarity over truth. Anything visible, measurable, and familiar feels safer even when it's irrelevant. Now let's move away from the street. Look at how people approach real problems. They focus on what can be counted, what can be tracked, what can be explained quickly. But the most important factors rarely live there. They live in the dark. Skills that take years to build, decisions that involve uncertainty, conversations people are afraid to have. This is where the streetlight effect becomes dangerous, because it doesn't feel like avoidance. It feels like productivity. Imagine someone wants to become a director. They know logically what actually matters: strategic thinking, leadership under pressure, decision-making without complete information. But those skills are uncomfortable. They're slow to learn, hard to measure, easy to fail at. So instead, the person stays under the light. They polish their resume, collect certificates, optimize small tasks. It feels productive, but it's misdirected. Months pass. Years pass. They are busy, but not progressing. This is the real cost of the streetlight effect. You keep solving visible problems while the real problem remains untouched. And fear plays a role here. The dark isn't empty. It's threatening. It forces you to confront questions like, what if I'm not good enough? What if I try and fail? So the brain protects itself. It says, stay where you feel competent. And competence becomes a cage. This pattern appears everywhere. In relationships, people focus on surface behaviors instead of unspoken resentment. In learning, they memorize facts instead of understanding systems. In self-improvement, they chase tactics instead of fixing the root cause. Now let's correct the bias, not by forcing yourself into the dark blindly, but by changing how you search. Step 1. Identify the light. Ask yourself, what am I focusing on because it's easy to measure or explain? Step 2. Name the dark. Ask, what part of this problem feels uncomfortable, vague, or risky? If it scares you, it matters. Step 3. Move the effort, not the comfort. Progress does not come from perfecting what's visible. It comes from slowly illuminating what's hidden. Now return to the street. The man stops searching under the streetlight. He stands up. He walks into the dark. It's slower. It's uncertain. But it's honest. And that's where the keys are. The streetlight effect never disappears. Your mind will always prefer what's easy to see. But once you recognize it, you stop mistaking convenience for truth. And that shift changes how you grow, how you decide, and how far you actually go. We just explored how looking only where it's easy doesn't always help. Now it's time for Effect 3, the Sunk Cost Fallacy. This one shows why we stick to things just because we already invested in them. Let's look at a decision people make every day. A man sits in front of his laptop. The screen is open. He looks tired. He's been working on this project for months. It's not going well. The results are bad. He knows it. But he keeps going, thinking he's already spent too much time to quit now. Pause here. This is not perseverance. This is not discipline. This is the sunk cost fallacy. The sunk cost fallacy is the tendency to continue something not because it's still a good decision, but because you've already invested time, money, or effort into it. The key word here is past. Sunk costs cannot be recovered. They exist only in memory. But the brain refuses to let them go. Now let's break down what's happening. Rationally, decisions should be based on future value. What will happen if I continue? What will happen if I stop? But the brain asks a different question. What would it mean if I quit now? And that question is loaded. Quitting feels like failure. It feels like admitting you were wrong. So instead of evaluating outcomes, the mind protects identity. It says, if I stop, all that effort was wasted. But here's the truth. That effort is already gone. Continuing doesn't recover it. It only adds more cost. This is how the sunk cost fallacy causes damage. It traps people in bad paths because leaving feels worse than staying. Let's move into real life. Think about careers. Someone chooses a major, spends years studying, gets a job in that field. Then they realize something uncomfortable. They don't enjoy the work. They're not growing. They feel stuck. But they stay. Why? I've already invested too much. I can't just throw it away. So they trade long-term satisfaction for short-term emotional comfort. Years pass. The cost isn't just time anymore. It's resentment, burnout, regret. The same pattern appears in relationships. Someone stays in a relationship not because it's healthy, but because of shared history. We've been together so long. I don't want all of this to be for nothing. But history is not a reason, it's a record. In business, the fallacy is brutal. Companies pour money into failing projects because stopping would look bad. They don't want to admit the original decision was wrong, so they keep paying for it. Now let's expose the core illusion. The sunk cost fallacy treats consistency as virtue. But consistency without direction is just persistence in error. Here's the correction. Not be strong, not push through. You break the sunk cost fallacy by changing the decision frame. Step 1. Cut the past out of the equation. Ask this question clearly. If I were starting today with zero investment, would I choose this again? If the answer is no, the decision is already made. Step 2. Rename quitting. You are not giving up. You are stopping the loss. That's not weakness, that's control. Step 3. Set exit rules in advance. Decide before you start what conditions justify stopping. This removes ego from the decision. Now return to the man at the desk. He looks at the screen again. He pauses, thinking, if I started today, I wouldn't choose this. He closes the file. Not because the past didn't matter, but because the future matters more. The sunk cost fallacy doesn't disappear. Your brain will always want to justify past effort, but once you see it clearly, you stop paying interest on old mistakes, and that single shift can save years of your life. All these illusions from the spotlight effect to sunk cost show us one thing. Our mind is powerful, but not always accurate. The more we act with awareness, the freer we become. I'm Weaverwolf, and I hope to be your companion on the path ahead. If you found this helpful, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next episodes. Now, for today, this is goodbye, but only for now.